It's not often that someone who's been dead for nearly 200 years suddenly finds you, but that's exactly what happened right here on this spot 13 years ago.
A man appeared, well, not literally, of course, but unmistakably, and handed me a responsibility that would come to shape the rest of my life. Hi, I'm Vana Carmona, founder of the Prince Project, and that man was named Prince, the namesake of the Prince Project.
So this is Prince's stone, right here in the Eastern Cemetery in Gorham, Maine. I really wasn't looking for him. I was actually here looking for other relatives, and I stumbled upon this. I didn't recognize his name, but I went home, and after a little bit of research, I discovered that he was a man who had been enslaved by my very own ancestors. His enslaver was a man named William McClellan, otherwise known as Uncle Billy, and he is a distant great uncle of mine. And then I realized something that I remembered my grandmother saying. She told me once that there was a black man here in Gorham that, quote, helped the family when they needed help. She never mentioned the West Indies. She never mentioned bondage. She never mentioned enslavement. At the time, what she said went right over my head. After all, I didn't know that enslavement even existed in Maine. I had been through the school system here for 13 years in Maine, and I had never ever heard of any of this. I was outraged, but pretty soon it occurred to me that finding Prince, he really meant for me to go find this information out. And what I thought would be maybe finding, maybe a couple dozen people here in this area, turned out to be the Prince Project database, which is now over 2,300 people that were enslaved in Maine or descended from enslaved people in Maine before 1800. But today is Prince's Day, and we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about what we know about him, what we don't know about him, and also what we hope to find out. There's still many mysteries surrounding his life. Question number one, is he buried here at all? First, just recently, I found a new source that says that this Eastern Cemetery, which originally was known as the New Yard, was purchased by the city in 1830. But that's a whole year after Prince died. Does this mean that it was just open space back here where he was buried? Well, it could be. That was very typical at the time, that somebody would be simply buried out behind their enslaver's barn. I know a man who was living in Gorham, and while he was walking from Gorham to Scarborough one day, he passed away of a heart attack or something. And the story is that he was just simply buried by the side of the road. It would certainly explain why he is the oldest recorded death that we have here in this section. All these other people around him, they're all white individuals, and they all died later. Typically, the black section of a cemetery would always be segregated. It would be way down in the back, as far away from the gate as one could possibly make it. And this certainly would be true in this case. So it didn't seem like any surprise to me when I found Prince this far away down in the back of Eastern Cemetery. But now, if this wasn't a cemetery until 1830, then that was not the case. Now it's clear that this was not a designated, segregated black section of Eastern Cemetery. So this is his stone. And my first impression was like, wow, this is really wonderful that he was so cared about that his enslavers actually gave him this lovely stone. But looking at the situation more closely, this isn't true at all. In fact, this stone was probably put here a long time after Prince's death. Just because somebody died in a specific year, it doesn't mean that that's when they got their stone. It could typically be put up many years later, regardless. And Uncle Billy certainly didn't do it because he died 17 years before Prince did. A slave whom the first William McClellan of Gorham bought in Portland, Maine, and paid for in shooks. Prince drove the team to draw them. He ran away and enlisted in Captain Manley's privateer and was discharged in Boston, came back, was freed, given 10 acres of land and a pension. Died 1829, over 100 years old. His wives, Dinah, died 1800, Chloe died 1827. This is not a typical gravestone. Normally, you would have a simple name, date of birth, date of death, and maybe a small epitaph. But this reads more like a mini bio, etched in stone. My theory is that this stone was indeed put there many years later, probably by the McClellan descendants. This would have been typical at the time because it was in the mid-19th century that it became very fashionable to do one's genealogy. It was a great way of basically polishing your origin story. I know that the McClellans did have such a group. I know because my grandmother used to tell me about attending some of their gatherings. Putting up the stone later also would explain why both of his wives are listed on the stone. They died 27 years apart, and Chloe died 2 years before Prince himself. So would they be buried with him in the same spot? It doesn't seem likely. And recently, we uncovered a bit of new information that says that most people didn't even have a clue when Prince died. In fact, Hugh D. McClellan, who went on to write the history of Gorham, didn't have any idea himself. He ended up 40 years after Prince's death writing a letter to the pension office to ask them, when did Prince actually die?
They replied with the actual date, July 19th, 1829.
So the stone, if that is the case, it has the date of 1829. It would have to have been put up after 1868. And also, no one who personally knew Prince would have written this because it's not accurate. The history of Gorham tells a slightly different story, that it was Rebecca, Uncle Billy's wife, who requested of Captain Joseph McClellan, Uncle Billy's cousin who lived in Portland, that the next time he went down to the West Indies, if he could bring him back a man that they could enslave here in Gorham. This mentions the shooks. Shooks were the wood that we would gather here and that we could market down in the West Indies. Once it was taken down to the West Indies, it was used for the barrels that were used for the products that the enslaved people were making to bring up here. This was one of the things that we had here that was easily marketable in the West Indies, along with the porous fish that we had that was also taken to feed the enslaved labor. Our local merchants, including Captain Joseph McClellan, made a very wonderful income this way. And that was one of the things that our economy here was based on. So the shooks actually did pay for Prince, but just not in Portland. It was in the West Indies. The inscription claims that Prince was freed after he returned from the Revolutionary War. Well, that's only partly true. This implies that Uncle Billy freed him, and I definitely know that that is not the case. It wasn't that he was thanking Prince because of his fighting in the Revolutionary War. Looking back, there are records that say that Uncle Billy didn't even want Prince to enlist. Prince had to escape and go and enlist on his own. And why would Uncle Billy free him in the first place? After all, he was free labor. In reality, Prince was indeed freed in 1783, but not by Uncle Billy. He was freed by the Massachusetts Judicial Court. The court ended slavery in Massachusetts, and that is also Maine, since we were a part of Massachusetts up until 1820. The state constitution originally said that all men were born free and equal. However, it really wasn't meant to apply to anyone other than white people. But that got challenged. So in 1783, the court said, okay, everyone is free and equal. So legally speaking, Uncle Billy could not go to court and present his bills of sale or whatever and saying that he owned Prince as human property. Now, it's very important to understand that this is not abolition. This was a judicial decision. It was not a legislative one. So Uncle Billy did not free Prince. The law did. The stone says that Uncle Billy gave Prince land, that he gave him 10 acres of land. This is simply not true. Prince came back after the war and continued to work on Uncle Billy's property all the way up until his death. He actually transitioned, what I say, from slavery to serfdom. We'll get to more of that in a minute. It also says that Prince received a pension. Oh, yes, he did. In 1821, 38 years after the end of the Revolutionary War. So let's move on to the next mystery. His wives. Are they actually buried here with him? That's highly doubtful, as we have already said. So if Prince is buried here, it would be highly unusual that his wives would be buried with him. After all, they died 3 and 30 years before him. And so they would be here, all of them, in this big open space that wasn't even a cemetery? That doesn't make any sense. Looking even more closely at the local histories, it says that Uncle Billy actually purchased Dinah as a wife for Prince. And then it says that after Dinah's death, he purchased Chloe. But the history of Gorham says that Prince and Chloe were together for 60 or 70 years, which would have put them together in about 1760. And those dates don't add up. And that's because records show that Dinah passed away in 1800. And this was only a year after we find the official announcement of Prince and Chloe's marriage. So what happened to Dinah? Was she sold off? She certainly didn't pass away, but somehow Prince ended up with Chloe. And they were together until her death 2 years before his. Perhaps it reflected white society's need to see blacks as somehow superhuman, a way to justify the unimaginable treatment that they received. In the West Indies, for example, we know that 50% of the people died within 3 to 5 years of arriving from Africa. Yet the white histories marvel at how they lived to be 100. I'm open to ideas on that one. So, if Prince is not here in Eastern Cemetery, where is he? This land once belonged to Uncle Billy. His actual house wasn't here. His house was over about a mile south of the town. He built a house there in 1763. He became quite the landowner, and his property eventually extended all along this road, which now is called McClellan Road. So it was actually right here in this area that Prince, Dinah, and Chloe lived, worked, and died. Local oral history suggests that Prince may have been buried on Uncle Billy's property. We don't know if that's true or not, but it was common practice. We have no concrete evidence that there was a burial ground on Uncle Billy's property. But if it is true that there was a burial ground on Uncle Billy's property, then it would be logical that Prince, Dinah, and Chloe would all be buried there. It would make sense rather than to take them 2 miles up into town and bury them in an open space. Uncle Billy's house was dismantled after he died, and it was used to build another house up in town. So I don't know if we'd ever really be able to locate where that possible burial ground would be located. But one thing we do know, Uncle Billy did not give Prince 10 acres of land and a house after the Revolution, nor was this land given to Prince in Uncle Billy's will after he died in 1812. But Prince did get that 10 acres of land. He got that land because he paid for it in cold, hard cash. So here is the deed. It's dated 1812, many, many years after the end of the Revolution. And in this deed, as Billy was dying, he sold the land to Prince. Interestingly, the deed has 2 grantors on it, Uncle Billy and his nephew, also named William. Uncle Billy was very close to this nephew, so much so that in 1807, when his nephew William married, he arranged to give him this property. Give him. Again, that's deceiving because Uncle Billy is still on the deed. And It does mean, however, because he never had any children, that upon his passing, that this land would then indeed go 100% to his nephew William. This nephew William, by the way, is a direct great-great-grandfather of mine. So once again, I have to deal with the fact that it wasn't just some distant uncle that enslaved Prince, but also a direct ancestor as well. And that ancestor was also one of the men who sold this property to Prince. Yes, Prince did have to buy the property, the 10 acres. It was $100. So let's go see where that piece of land actually is. We were recently able to track it down.
So, here we are where Prince lived out his life, the property that he purchased. We find it interesting that this piece of property is about as far away from Uncle Billy's house as it could possibly be. Kind of like the segregated black sections in the burial grounds. It's at the extreme edges. But wait, let's look at that deed again. Prince's freedom from his dependence on the McClellan family came with someone else's terms, Uncle Billy's and my great-great-grandfather's terms. 1. The transfer of the property would be after Uncle Billy's death, so they had to pay and wait. Luckily, it was only a few months. 2. The McClellans provided themselves an easement on the property. They reserved the right to the use of the road to a bridge over the Stroudwater River. 3. Prince and his son Enoch had to live on the land if they wanted to use it and keep it. And lastly, neither Prince nor Enoch could sell the land. Only Enoch's heirs, that would be Prince's grandchildren, could sell it. And that is why these 10 acres in Gorham were not sold for 50 years. Finally, in 1862, another Enoch, Prince's grandson, sold the property to a man named Alexander McClellan Allen for a measly $62.50. Ironically, Alexander Allen was the grandson of William the nephew who owned the property and sold it to Prince. So the property ended up back to a new generation of the McClellan family with Alexander, who also happens to be my great-great-uncle. But in the meantime, Prince was at least able to live out his life on the property where he had been since his arrival from the West Indies. So perhaps Prince isn't buried in the town cemetery or behind the old McClellan barn, wherever that may be, but on the very ground he worked and the land he finally owned. At the end of the day, the question remains, where is Prince? The answer? We don't know for sure, but we do know this. We know exactly where his spirit is. I'm Vonna Carmona, and thank you from all of us at the Prince Project.